What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, holding it down in the DraftKings Boston studios. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% in your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. Got a great show, as always. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us at 5-star ratings, and check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel, DraftKingsNetwork.com. Samsung TV Plus, a bunch of other places. We are finally all back in our separate locations here. We are going to hopefully have Allen Robinson from the Pittsburgh Steelers join us today. Jake Butt, former Michigan Wolverine, which is going to be a little bit interesting, adding that to the cocktail around here to look ahead at Ohio State, Penn State, the game of the week this weekend. But, Dad, we got you up out the pain of my house here. You're no longer complaining about snacks. Do you feel better this morning? Are all your needs taken care of now that you don't have me to blame for them?
Yeah, now that I'm doing, things for myself here, it's all fine. I mean, your place, you did give me the bed. You didn't let me use the nice chair you have as a 60-year-old man. You took that from me. You jammed me in the corner where I couldn't even get up during the entire show. So, yeah, listen, we took a nice walk by the beach, which was very, very nice, a little father-son time. So you make it sound worse than it is. I love spending time with one of my children, and you made it sound like I didn't have any fun, and that hurts a little bit, okay?
Wow.
You made it sound like you didn't have any fun when you were here. Jesse, he's gaslighting me right now, and I don't appreciate it. You're seeing what I'm seeing.
I just want to lock on to one thing that Senior said, which is now that he's doing things for himself, he's fine. But is your wife not there? Are you
She's
alone?
not here. I have the run of the house here in Arizona for a couple of days, which means everything just gets done and cleaned up at the last minute. But I leave it clean. My wife is so good at cleaning things as you go so they don't pile up. And if I was here for a longer time, I would do that. But when it's just a couple of days, I'll just leave stuff out. She's listening right now. She's going to be really mad at me and text me. But it will be all clean by the time I go, because woe be the person that doesn't clean the area in the house here. If my wife's not around, you got to take care of business, and that's what I'm doing.
Oh my God, this is more credence. I saw this tweet this morning, and one of our producers alerted me to this as we got news yesterday that the Giants, San Francisco Giants, have formally requested to interview their assistant coach Alyssa Nacken for their manager position. And speaking to the effect that women can have on the life of men, someone tweeted in tongue-in-cheek saying, "I hate this. The Giants will be unstoppable now with a woman running things. I used to eat ice cream at 3 a.m. before I put a woman in charge of my life. These dudes are going to be using coasters and batting 350 all season long." Truer words never spoken about the effect that just base level confidence. The difference between men and women on this stuff is so staggering. Jessie obviously nodding her head, understanding. She sees every day between, I'm sure, her own husband at home and then the two morons she has to come in and work with every day, just how staggering this can be.
Yes. I will say, in my house, my husband is the one, I'm like an incompetent. If I was left, he's leaving on Thursday actually for a business trip to China, and he's going to be gone for a week. And I'm going to eat takeout every night. He cooks in our house. He does all the cooking.
Oh, okay.
Because he's amazing at it and he loves it. But yes, I did have to I had to train him up a little bit about cleaning up. He thinks he's Salt Bae. He's salting things like this in the kitchen. Like he's like squeezing lemons and like just tossing them onto the marble countertop. So I do have to sort of follow him and clean up after him as we go, because it is truly horrifying to watch a man clean up after he's been like he'll like be like rubbing oil into the table, and I'm like,
I have learned to clean up better. Now, I don't do it as good as my wife, as well as my wife, but I have learned to do it to a satisfactory point where she is fine with it because I do it well enough. I did do an experiment one time when I was at ESPN and we lived in Connecticut, and she was gone, I think for close to a week. We always have multiple dogs. Like now we have 3, Hank, Harry, and Ted. So we have multiple dogs back then. And so when I used a dish and got it dirty, I would put it in the dishwasher. But then I realized I wasn't loading up that many dishes. I wasn't using that many. So I would have the dogs lick the dish clean, and then I would put it back in the cupboard. So it was kind of a test. It was kind of a test to see if my wife would ever find that out. And I did it. Yeah, I'm guilty.
Did she find out? Did she notice?
Well, she just found out. She just found out.
Yeah, she did. Listen, the dogs, they could lick dishes clean,
but
man.
But it's not clean because a dog licked it.
I let a dog lick my face, so what? I mean, what's the big deal? I feel like it's clean in my face.
We eat off those plates.
The dog
How many plates have you done this to?
The dog licked my face all week too. I didn't shower, so I mean, it all worked out well.
Yeah, but then you didn't put that thing that was licked into a cabinet and let it marinate and let the bacteria grow on it, and then put more food on top of it.
Well, and none of us have to use your face to consume the food that we eat.
Yeah. See, well, but you know what? The test worked. Do you know why?
Nobody got sick.
You're all still here and nobody got sick. So it was a test and it worked. Dogs can clean dishes. Just put them back. You don't have to save water on the dishwasher.
I could probably put my nuts on a dish and then you wouldn't notice and then you would eat off of it.
Yeah, no, he makes a solid point. He could do that all up on a bunch of dishes. And you might not get sick, but would you consider that sanitary to eat off of?
All up on a bunch of dishes.
All up on a bunch of dishes. But it's just pulling dish after dish
on your dish.
Come on. What are you doing? What are you taking this show? I'm talking about a dog licking a plate. Look where you're going.
I mean, what do you think they're licking?
You're sacking a plate, for God's sake. That's a good point.
They lick their butts.
That's just sack transfer is all that is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, none of you guys knows. And I'm not going to lie. When I saw somebody grab a plate after that and put some food on it, I giggled to myself.
What the hell?
Oh my God.
A 60-year-old toddler.
Well, this wasn't when I was 60. This was at least 4 years ago.
Oh, okay. There we go. So we're all much safer and better.
It's going to be paper plates from now on for all your kids at the houses.
This is the level of outrage that should be reserved for moments like this, where you find out your father's been sabotaging your meals for years now as a dirty old man. Yeah. Instead of the outrage that we got yesterday, Dad, we didn't get to talk about this because I feel like we're going to get to it in a second, a little bit of fact or fiction in the NFL, but I feel like I can say definitively the fact yesterday is we can't trust sports fans, and this is another men and women thing, with anything yesterday. Did you see the reaction to the Chargers fan from that game the other night? The woman's name is Marianne Doe, and she went viral at the Chargers game because she was so excited. She was living and dying with every play, and we all know the idea and the joke is there's not a lot of Chargers fans that you can find. And so finding one who is this passionate really stuck out to a lot of people. She instantly became a meme. And then the very next day I wake up and there's a bunch of weird theories that she's a paid actor, or people wondering if she was AI rendering in the stadium. What the hell is wrong with people? The deep dive that people did on this woman's fandom, pulling a picture of her wearing Minnesota Vikings gear, only for the report to come out then after that she's supporting her kids' team who plays for a Little League Vikings team. It was deranged behavior online, which is saying something considering the things that we see online every day.
Well, didn't I hear she also said she's a Viking fan, and you don't have to be a fan of just one team? Because listen, I was calling that game. You were at that game, Mike, and she was all over the video screen there, getting her time. And then, there's a thought that, she's looking for 15 minutes of fame. She won on every show imaginable there. So I don't know what to believe about her, in all honesty. It looked like at the time a sincere fan living and dying with their team, but then you hear about the Vikings. You hear about going on every talk show, wondering if she was an actor paid to do it and just wanting some exposure, which she certainly got with all the interviews she was doing. So you're right. I don't. We know there are more passionate fans than not, but this one certainly raised a few eyebrows.
So I will say, it has been reported that she and her husband did reach out to the Chargers and ask them to release their names.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, she was looking for some pub, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't think
right?
that. No, I think she was looking to prove she was a real person and not a paid actor. Like,
so you think it was all sincere and say, I just want to prove I'm real, and it wasn't looking for any kind of pub or anything anywhere?
Yes, because I haven't seen her promote a product yet or anything. Like, she went to a game and they had people questioning if she was real or not just because she showed up on the camera. Like, I'd probably want to come out and say, no, I'm a real person too.
Let's keep an eye on this one and see if things start leading toward other things for her. And I'm not saying she's going to come out and promote something right away, but now she's been out there. So let's see if she now tries to use that for something.
Guys, she is a season ticket holder. The Chargers have confirmed. So
that was why she said she wanted her name released, so that people could see, no, they're listed season ticket holders. We're not new to this. We're true to this. They've been coming to games, and she was just excited and nerve-wracked by what was going on in the middle of the game.
Then. That's cool then. If that's the case, I mean, that's where, unfortunately, we are in society, right, where we question everything. It looked like a sincere moment of her living and dying with her team, and all of a sudden, all kind of questions and darts are being thrown.
It was just ridiculous to watch the wave of all that happening. And honestly, it's the proliferation of all these weird blue checkmark Dove Kleiman Twitter accounts that make no sense and are only pseudo-factually based online. Elon's Twitter has been a nightmare. I'm never calling it X. All right. Speaking of things that aren't a nightmare and the NFL, it's time to play a little NFL fact or fiction today, Dad. We've had so much that went on this week. We've hit Wednesday. For anyone looking for our friend Charlotte Wilder, by the way, Charlotte will be joining us next week on Wednesday as she is out here with the Dan Le Batard crew, fulfilling some obligations in Los Angeles. Got a lot going on, so we will not have her with us this morning. Instead, what we will have is a little bit of NFL fact or fiction today, Dad. As Jesse, we also have a lot of news coming out of the NFL relating to some injuries and some important ones from this last week. So why don't we get some facts on that front before we get to the potential fiction of what we saw on the field?
Yeah, so Trevor Lawrence, he's been saying his left knee is improving rapidly over the past 2 days. He's optimistic he's going to be able to play in Thursday night's game at New Orleans. Check this out.
I'm going to do everything I can to be out there. I feel a lot better today than I would have thought, so I like how I'm progressing, and I'm going to do everything I can to be out there on Thursday.
All right, so, we're going to hopefully be seeing Trevor Lawrence, and Christian McCaffrey could also be suiting up on Monday. He suffered that oblique rib injury in the loss to the Browns, apparently avoided a long-term injury. It's not super serious, has a chance to play Monday night against the Vikings. And all-around optimistic news there, because apparently Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel also have a chance to play in Monday's game. Samuel leaving that game late in the first quarter because of the shoulder injury. Williams gritting through an ankle sprain, but we have an optimistic outlook. We could be seeing everybody on the field.
Obviously a tougher situation for Lawrence because he's doing 3 less days of a normal week, right? When you're playing early, and For the San Francisco guys, they actually get an extra day, not play until Monday. So it works out a little bit better for them. But it does look like they're getting their full complement back, because that's one of the things that's part of the equation every week when we talk in the NFL that we just can't prognosticate. We have no idea who's going to get hurt or when they're going to get hurt, or in the case of Fact or Fiction, how it's going to affect the team.
Exactly. So why don't we get to that now? With that as the background of this, Dad, especially with the 49ers, that good injury news here. Fact or Fiction, Brock Purdy is merely mediocre without all of the weapons around him in that offense.
So I'm not gonna say fact on that just yet. We have basically a 1-game sampling, right? I mean, he was playing well. He hadn't lost a regular season game. Lost McCaffrey, lost Debo in this one. Trent was only out a short time and came back, and his numbers were weaker. He also was playing against the best defense in the NFL. Let's just not, poo-poo the fact you're playing a great defense. I know they have a great offense, and by the way, they have a great defense. But other great defenses can affect you in the outcome of a game. And this Browns defense is now, the best by yardage, the best defense in the game. So I am not ready to say fact on that yet with a 1-game sampling of he lost a couple of his guys and he looked more human. I will say it was partly that, certainly part of the Cleveland Browns defense being as good as it is. So I'm going to need more sampling of that before I can say that's a fact.
More sampling is always the operative term for me with Brock Purdy. We're still learning about this guy.
Yeah,
He started, 11 career games at this point now? Like, we still have not seen a lot of this football player overall in the NFL. We don't have a full season's worth of starts under his belt. And so every week it's something. All the things you said are true, Dad, about what we account for on the other side, and the fact that it is much more difficult to try and rework for any offense, for any quarterback, your game plan mid-game as you're losing your weapons here. This isn't like what we had with the Kansas City Chiefs going into week 1, where on the defensive side, you had Chris Jones out all camp. You knew he was holding out there. You knew he wasn't going to be on the field. And so they were able to craft a game plan without him that made use of other people's talents, versus on the Chiefs on the other side, Travis Kelce, you lose him midweek, life gets a lot harder. That's what the 49ers were dealing with 2 of the most important pieces of their offense. So no, Brandon Newman has rubbed off on me to where I'm not full-blown Purdy defender right now, but I do think we're all way too eager to live on the ends of the spectrum with Brock. Everyone who loves him wants him to be the best quarterback in the NFL right now, which I don't believe he is. But after this one game, everybody also wanted to throw dirt on his name in a way that I thought was pretty unfair. Right to criticize in certain instances throws that he missed, but to overall use this to now validate feelings on the other side. Everyone's looking for confirmation bias with this dude, and I'm not going to fall into that trap. Dad, speaking of the Browns, fact or fiction, the Browns defense will carry them to the playoffs in the AFC this year.
Oh, I think that's absolutely a fact that can happen. I mean, listen, we have seen great defenses lead teams to win Super Bowls. Now, it's on a more rare occasion, and in today's game, it's going to be a lot harder to do. But to get to the playoffs, absolutely this defense can help lead them to the playoffs. Now, it's certainly a tough division, though. The Pittsburgh offense isn't lighting anybody up either, but they have an excellent defense. We talked about this yesterday. All the AFC North defenses are really good. Probably on a consistency level, maybe Cincinnati isn't with the other ones, but they can show out like they have occasionally as well, especially getting pressure on the quarterback. But yes, I don't think there's any doubt that I've always said this, and not like I've said it, it's a fact. You have a great defense, you're in every game. Deshaun Watson, A, has to be healthy, and B, has to start stepping up a little better for this offense, even though they have lost Nick Chubb. But it's absolutely a fact that their defense can carry them to the playoffs.
Right now, in the current early look in the playoff standings, the Browns would be the 7th seed in the AFC, and you would have the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Browns all making the postseason if the season ended today. This stat was from Monday, Dad. The Browns have allowed 1,002 yards this season. It's the 3rd fewest by a team in its first 5 games of a season since 1970. Only the Baltimore Colts in 1971 and the Minnesota Vikings in 1970 allowed fewer. So it's an historic pace for Jim Schwartz's bunch there. I agree, Dad. I think what we're going to see in the NFL a lot this year, and I said this about the Cowboys yesterday doing an interview, is you've got a bunch of really potent defenses right now that are really only going to require their offense to make enough plays over the body of a game. With Dak Prescott, he was able to make those individually. With the Cleveland Browns, it's going to remain to be seen if Kevin Stefanski's going to have to morph back into a little bit more and more of what he used to do to cover up for Deshaun Watson, who hasn't been the guy so far, or if they're going to get the plays from Deshaun Watson if he gets back healthy that they were expecting this season. But I agree, that defense is that good enough. Dad, fact or fiction this year, the Eagles' offense, not as good as last year. That feels like a pretty easy fact considering just what – I feel like we already have forgotten what the Eagles were as far as historically great on offense last year.
I mean, but you look at it, they're number 2 overall in offense, number 2 in rushing offense, and number 9 in passing offense. So it's not like statistically they're bad, but to your point, they don't feel like they're as efficient on offense this year, while statistically it's still pretty impressive of what they're doing. But just by the eye test, I agree with you. They don't seem as good or as efficient. Doesn't mean they can't get there, because we're saying the same thing about Cincinnati. We think Cincinnati may have turned the corner. We know the firepower on offense they can have, and statistically they're last in the NFL in offense, but we think they can get better. So I think by eye test, yes, it does look like that their offense isn't as good at this point as last year.
And some of that's been Jalen Hurts has looked a little bit more off than he was last year, a guy who was dialed in on MVP pace, set the Eagles single season record with 35 touchdowns accounted for. So I do think it's not quite as good as last year. I do think right now DeAndre Swift coming on the way he has after the first couple of games of the season has been huge. Devontae Smith has taken a bit of a backseat to A.J. Brown after that public spat that we saw on the sideline. I don't think it's as good as last year, but last year you said about every team offensive record in the books and wound up basically a player too shy of winning the damn Super Bowl. So I don't think that's necessarily wild to say. We'll play a little bit more fact or fiction maybe later on. We got a couple other NFL headlines that we can get to. But coming up next, let's take a look at what we heard from Aaron Rodgers yesterday. That Jets defense looking for a lifeline. Is Rodgers close to recovery? Next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, Aaron Rodgers has been making waves, as he likes to do. So he shocked everyone by walking without crutches, throwing on the field for 5 minutes before Sunday's game at MetLife Stadium. As you can see here, just hanging out, just tossing the old pigskin. So he appears to be recovering at a previously unheard of rate. Plus, the Jets are on that 2-game winning streak. So, of course, all of this has fueled some speculation about a late season return. He addressed all of the hype with Pat McAfee.
Obviously, we're ahead of schedule. There's a lot of factors to that. There's the way I've attacked the rehab. There's obviously the surgery that Dr. Elitrosh did. There's the rehab that I've done and kind of the round-the-clock approach that I've had. There's implementing the diet that I've been doing as well. And then just the power of the mind and the power of the manifestation of the desires. All those things together still doesn't get you back on the field. You have to hit a bunch of different things and be feeling a certain way. But that's the goal. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to put a timetable on it specifically. That makes absolutely no sense. Anybody that doesn't realize that there's a lot of things that have to happen to get to that point.
So he's kind of doing both, where he's stirring the pot, but he's also being like, but there's critical markers, so don't get any ideas that I could be coming back. He's like, but also the power of the mind.
Yeah, Dad, I appreciate that he pointed out that these notions and people bringing up the timeline of him coming back at the end of the season aren't him. Like, he recognizes, I gotta have a doctor tell me that I'm good to go. And there's a lot of things I have to get to. He mentioned jogging is also the next step is going to be jogging before you get to explosive movement and all the critical markers along the way here. I have no doubt that a player with Aaron Rodgers' mental makeup, a guy who is a true professional when it comes to the way he conducts himself and prepares as a football player, and a guy who I'm sure doesn't want to go out on somebody else's terms at the end of his career, is going to be attacking this in a way that maybe few other people are capable of. The way he's conducted his whole football career is a way few other people are capable of. But everybody needs to probably stop, hold their horses on this. And Aaron Rodgers, thankfully, throwing some cool water on that.
Well, exactly. And I mean, when I have been talking about this, whether on this show or different shows, people are making it sound like I'm disputing Aaron Rodgers' ability to come back. No, I'm talking about basically fans who are hearing Aaron talk and saying, oh, my God, he could be back by the end of the season. And I don't think there's any way that's going to happen. But of course, he's going to attack it. And just like he said, I mean, that's what athletes do. I mean, there's the period of despair where you're hurt. You're like, oh, my God, this is usually you're out for the year. And then you start attacking rehab because you want to get back on the field. He's not the first and won't be the last that's going to do that. But as he said, and he's right, there is a timetable to all of this, and there are markers that you have to hit. You look at one of the more impressive ones, and to put it into a little bit of context in this sport. And listen, running backs and quarterbacks do different things on the football field. So sure. Cam Akers, it was truly amazing. Man. He tore his Achilles in mid-July of 21. And he returned to doing football-specific drills in November. So that's 4 months from the tear to doing specific drills. Now, again, specific drills are a wide range of what he was doing on the field. And he returned to practice just before Christmas. So that's right around the 5-month area where he returned to practice around Christmas time. So you do see that, and we've seen miraculous recoveries. Hell, Adrian Peterson, threw off the ACL tear, the recovery when he came back in like 6-7 months, and everybody was like, oh my God, everybody should be able to do that. And no, that's not true.
We realize Adrian Peterson is not a good marker for the rest of society.
There are those that heal faster, that just do. Everybody is different. Everybody could be rehabbing the exact same with incredible ferocity, but you don't know how your body's going to respond. So, I understand Aaron taking both sides of it. I would, you do look at a Cam Akers and say, boy, okay, can you get back some? Quarterback doesn't do as much as a running back. But let me tell you, you come back from that too early, the possibility of ripping it again. I've read about other athletes who have tried to come back and you tear it again. I mean, how brutal that would be. And you got to throw in the fact that he's 39 years old. And that's not lost on anybody, especially Aaron, to know that body is going to, it happens in a normal thing when I got the league at 21 and left at like 31, 32 of how my body just normally felt during the week and when I recovered, let alone recovering from an injury. So that adds into the equation a lot.
Being 34 has given me a newfound appreciation for when older athletes show up in the injury report all the time and we're like, oh man, is this guy ever going to be healthy? I'm like, I roll out of bed and I don't feel healthy.
Oh, yeah.
Let alone trying to go do the things with their bodies that they're doing. Dad, I think the other factor that kind of plays into that is going to be interesting to monitor is how close this Jets team can be. We talked about the Browns defense trying to will them to a playoff appearance. The Jets are plus 450 on DraftKings Sportsbook to make the playoffs right now. And you do wonder for a player in the twilight of his career, because I think that age factors in a lot of ways, Dad. And one could be if Aaron Rodgers is crushing this rehab. And like you said, you get some sort of freak show Cam Akers style recovery to where you feel like you can be ready at that point, and you're coming back and doing that. And this team looks like, oh man, they could sneak and find a way into the playoffs. Does Aaron Rodgers say, well, given this Achilles, I'm not going to have many more cracks at this. The football season is so chaotic and unpredictable. If we've got a shot at the postseason and I could be back, and it's a risk, but it's a risk in the postseason, do you take that because you're closer to the end of your career than the beginning? And you can't take for granted that, oh, if I'm back healthy next year, we'll 100% be there in the postseason no matter what, and we'll have a chance to do this because those are very rare occurrences.
Yeah, they are. It'd be a tough position. But again, I think the decision is going to be made for him, because even the Cam Akers situation, listen to what I said, okay? 5 months before he returned to practice, not playing, just to practice. Do the math. He tore it in July. So July, August, September, October, November, December. That's 5 months, all right? 5 months was in December. For Aaron Rodgers, he tore it in September. That's October, November, December, January. February is 5 months. The Super Bowl is February 11th. So and that again for Cam Akers was just getting to practice, not to playing. We're talking about practice here. So I just think while it's a great goal and we'll get him back faster, I think, to be able to be there in the off season and prepare for the next year. And I'm with you, because you sit there and look and you think this team, they got some young talent on it. They should be really good again next year, but you can't rely on that. When you have your chance, you got to take it. But I still don't think, even if they make the playoffs, that he's going to be close enough physically to say, because I'd put him out there. Listen, if he got the okay by the doctors, he'd be out there as my quarterback. There is no doubt about that. But I just don't think that's going to be able to happen for him.
No, 100%. This is where I hear the voice of Dominique Foxworth in my head, who said sometimes you need a foam finger with the word football to come in and smack you on the face. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back and playing this season.
I don't think so.
That guy's not going to come back from Achilles and be ready to go by the time you get here. But your point, him getting back faster, having a full offseason to be in that program and not just be rehabbing, all of those can be important things, because, Dad, if you listen to Rob Saleh, he says his power, his superpower is just his presence around that building. So imagine what he can be when he comes back there. I did love the notion, Dad, that people were talking about Aaron Rodgers suggesting plays during that Eagles game and trying to give him credit potentially for what happened. I'm like, guys, he didn't do anything there. There's nothing about his presence that helped them win that game. Their defense helped them win that game. Yeah. I do think it is encouraging, though. You've got the perfect head coach for Aaron Rodgers in Rob Saleh, because he does feed into a lot of the things around Aaron that it seems like he believes in from an interpersonal standpoint, and he's still making him feel like he's a part of the team. Like, even though I don't believe Aaron Rodgers' presence is this thing willing the Jets to wins, Dad, I do think it's encouraging, because you know this, as a player going through the rehab process, it can be pretty lonely. You feel very separate from the team. And so I do like that Rob Saleh is going out of his way, when asked about this, when prompted, to make Aaron Rodgers still feel like a member of this team in a way that's not always the case when you're the guy going through the injury process.
I agree. And I do think there is a benefit to having him in the quarterback room with Zach Wilson. So
that is true. Yes.
As far as the defense is a hell of a defense, but have him at those meetings in the room with Zach Wilson, going over film with Zach Wilson, I do believe is definitely a positive for someone like Zach Wilson.
Rob Saleh saying his presence in the locker room, being around his teammates, his positive attitude, his thoughts of manifestation and all that stuff. Like Rob Saleh knows how to speak Aaron Rodgers' love language. Rob Saleh, who does seem like he believes in some of that stuff himself based on the guy we saw on Hard Knocks. But I do like that every once in a while he sprinkles a couple of Aaron's words into the public statements to let everybody know, hey, no, this is my guy. We're going to make him feel the love. Coming up next, let's get to some public statements relating to college football and Congress next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. And Dad, we had Congress talking about college sports again yesterday, and it produced some very predictable results, right? We had Senator Joe Manchin come out and say the quiet part very loud, talking about the current state of name, image, and likeness in college sports, where he said, quote, "It's hard to root for the kids when they're multimillionaires as freshmen and sophomores." And I knew that kind of dog whistle stuff was going to get a reaction. Dad, I don't know how you feel about it. Like, that was always quietly my fear in the back of my mind when we used to, when we were doing Golic and Wingo, and back before this NIL stuff became a reality, when we would have these conversations about pay for play, and I would hear this resistance from people about the idea of college athletes getting money, not the specific mechanics of it that we know are complicated, not the actual plan and practice, but just the idea of college athletes getting money. I'd hear all this aversion and I go, man, this sounds an awful lot like people who just want to know that the players they're watching don't make as much money as them, even though they've got gifts that they would rather have and opportunities that they are jealous of. They just can take solace in the fact that there's that power dynamic they've got over them. And I always thought that that was a little bit more prevalent than I was comfortable with. I've since changed my tone. I think comments like this are bad faith comments designed to cater to a base that I think does not exist as much in college football as I thought, because we've seen now, Dad, since players have started getting money, a lot less negative fan reaction than I was expecting. Like, you get it from talking heads every once in a while as a conversation topic, but in general, I think people are always worried about their thing changing in college sports. And I think people thought that this would bring about some sort of revolutionary change, when in actuality, most places are still very good. They're just very good getting there in a different way because of how they've got to acquire players. But as long as State U's still balling, I really haven't seen people care all that much how they get to that point, and if players have a few nicer cars or nicer suits in the process. I've been encouraged by that. What about you?
Well, listen, I never thought it was going to affect the game. I mean, I said that since the beginning of NIL, when everybody started screaming from the mountaintop, oh my God, amateurism is over. This game is going to change. It's never going to be the same. And I said, stadiums are still going to be full and ratings are still going to be high because you're rooting for your school. We root for Notre Dame. Now, players on the football team and other athletes, but in this case, we're talking football, are getting money, are getting paid. We've done events with some of these players, and we know that they're getting money. It doesn't affect me one bit. And it hasn't affected attendance, and it hasn't affected ratings. You're still rooting for your school. Dynamics have changed. We know that. And I think in the beginning there were the fans there were some that were bummed now we've really blurred the lines of professional sports and college sports, which
Sure.
already were getting blurred anyway, right? I mean,
Yes, very much so.
The last bastion of just fun, no responsibility football is high school, and that's even starting to get blurred. That's exactly right. But college has always been big business. Now it became big business where everybody included has a chance at a piece of the pie, meaning the players now. And I think that's one thing that bummed out fans was, man, now they're just like the guy I root for on Sunday. You know, when in fact it's the team you root for on Sunday, just like even more in college is the love of the team, maybe of the school more than the team in the NFL. So I never thought that was going to be affected. Now, everything around it is going to be affected because nobody can get their frickin' heads on straight on how to deal with this thing, because the NCAA immediately washed their hands of it. As I said, they Pontius Pilated the thing, you know, and let somebody else take care of this problem. Now they're trying to jump in and help. Now we're talking about employees. Now we're talking about finding a way to put guardrails up, and what will that entail? I still think one of the best ideas, and we heard it from Chip Kelly, right, when we had him on, you know, the coach at UCLA, and he said it before that, and I think eventually is to separate football from everything else, because I think it's ridiculous that the Pac-12 is going to the Big Ten and the ACC. You know me, because your sister swam, and
Sure.
we know other athletes, soccer, lacrosse, and all of that. I hate the fact that those athletes have to travel the way they do, and they're getting screwed in all of this. So take the issue, which is football, separate the issue, which is football, and let the others live their lives in the geographical area where they should.
So I think it's important to separate, as we're talking about this. Those are issues created by the adults of college football.
Yes.
Decision makers at the top of the sport, that we want to separate from what we were talking about here with NIL and the players, because everyone weirdly just sort of throws their hands up. And I shouldn't say that. There's been a lot of people publicly upset about the business restructuring in the world of college sports. Most are people that are just afraid, is my school going to get left behind? Are they going to be involved in the new world order going forward? The central issue with the stuff relating to player pay was around this idea and this antiquated notion that just because you're paid means you can't love something and means you can't care about something in the same ways. And while with the portal and all these things, the dynamic is different than kids just locked into 4 years at a college that they might actually grow to have some affinity for or committed to for that reason. No, it is a little bit more of a business-like approach, but I do think that's ridiculous in terms of them somehow loving it less. And again, what one congressman says, to me, I don't think is actually indicative of what I have seen in the response that I've seen overall from fans. Maybe I'm being naive now for my own mental health, trying to believe that people don't actually think like that. But that's at least where I'm at mentally with this. Dad, as far as the stuff you're talking about, the future of the sport as it relates to players and how they go about this, Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick actually had some of the interesting comments coming off the hearings in Capitol Hill yesterday, where he said, after talking to lawmakers and media, that collective bargaining with athletes might actually be the way forward, as schools, I think, are looking back at ways on trying how to take back control. And he said, quote, "It's a fairly radical notion, but if we could find a way to reach binding agreements with our student athletes, most of this goes away. We don't have a mechanism to collectively bargain without them becoming employees. It would require a new mechanism that would recognize the rights of student athletes to negotiate for the terms and conditions of their participation without being employees. It's worth consideration." Gene Smith, the departing Ohio State athletic director, had also brought this up. So maybe Jack on the way out now is shooting from the hip since he announced his retirement. But Dad, I think that being uttered publicly is already a huge step. And I think the idea of collective bargaining without them being employees, probably not going to be a thing that actually happens. But now that people are saying it out loud, I do think that's going to be something more and more considered, as well as employment status of the athletes playing the sports that you talked about.
That was something I just wasn't sure we were ever going to get to because of all the tentacles. But I'll say this. Former teammate of mine here at Notre Dame, he was a captain with me, played in the league for a bunch of years, Larry Williams, who was an offensive lineman. And Larry's been an AD at a number of different schools. He's at San Francisco right now as an athletic director. He had called me about a year and a half ago after NIL started, and he said he's been trying to talk to people, the higher ups, because he had said then, this is where it's going. It's going to go to collective bargaining. It's going to go to right what we're talking about and what Jack talked about. And he was trying to get power people to get ahead of this thing and say, this is the direction we need to be going in, because this, and I was like, Larry, I don't see that. And it's why it proves why there are many, many smarter people than me out there. And he's one of them, that to kind of have the foresight of saying, I think it's going there. Now, what are the steps to take it there? Because that really feels wild then, right? Now they're employees. Now, it's a whole different status of collective bargaining, of health insurance, health insurance when you're done, and all the tentacles that go along with it. But man, I'm kind of with you now. It seems like it's going down that road. And I'll continue to say, it's not going to change the game of football. You're still going to get college football. You're still going to get packed stadiums, but the things around it, the peripheral, is going to change and continue to change as we go.
Yeah, I think this last weekend was a good reminder. I challenge anyone to look at the scenes in Seattle, Washington, where Oregon and Washington played, and say that any of the change around the sport has affected the joy that you can get on an individual Saturday. No amount of playoff expansion or anything else, I think, is going to affect what you've got there, at least in the immediacy right now. But Dad, with this, I think it's worthwhile to consider and would make me feel a lot better about the world with all the change in it in college football we have, because all of it happens against their will. Part of the idea of collective bargaining would be giving the players a voice in all the change that happens to them around the sport. The playoff expansion that adds more games, the conference realignment that's going to affect their treble, all happens right now without any of their voice in the process, and that changing alone is worthwhile.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Some NBA news. The Houston Rockets have traded guard Kevin Porter Jr. and 2 future second-round picks to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They announced this last night. Thunder will be immediately waiving Porter. Rockets are getting Victor Oladipo and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl in the deal. Going to send a 2027 second-round pick via the Minnesota Timberwolves and a 2028 second-round pick via the Milwaukee Bucks to the Thunder. So, guys, the Thunder now have 37 total draft picks over the next 7 years, 15 first-rounders and 22 second-rounders. Quite a strategy we have.
They're walking into this with some capital. There's no doubt. There's been a very clear dictation there of how they're going to go about this, how they went about it in this particular situation. Kind of nasty business. Like, getting into the specifics of this trade feels gross considering everything hanging over Kevin Porter Jr.'s head right now. As we know, he's still facing charges of second-degree strangulation and third-degree assault, to which he has pled not guilty. We've seen now, his former girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend, has come out and said that he didn't hit me. He never balled up his fists and hit me. He definitely didn't punch me in the face numerous times. That's a lie. I don't have any injuries that support that. But, Dad, the idea of this trade going on in the midst of all this playing out in court feels rather gross. And so this particular instance, not something I don't think anyone involved should be celebrating, but it does get to Jesse's larger point that we've got an Oklahoma City team that for so long, Dad, I said, sat on this precipice of oblivion in the NBA. They had watched their portrait of superstars from that original team that had Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and James Harden as the sixth man, whittled down to one and then whittled down to none. And this difficult challenge of, when do you let go of a star player? That's the only reason people are paying attention. That's the only reason people have to come and watch your team, whether it's in person or on TV or discuss you on any of the shows, and then start to flip it for resources. And Sam Presti and company have flipped that switch all the way over. And now we got to kind of wait around and see what this haul of picks ends up becoming for a team that's going to once again have to search for the relevancy outside of being this offseason fascination for the war chest that they've built up.
So it's amazing. And first, you're right. With the Kevin Porter situation, you have to set that aside. That's the most important thing. That deals in life. And you're right, doing that all now feels like you need to shower after this situation and just how dirty it feels. So we'll see where that goes from the legal side. But it is wild to imagine that this team had Russell Westbrook, James Harden as a sixth man, and Kevin Durant. I mean, it blows your mind, right? There was a super team before the guys started putting super teams together, right? Supposedly. And I mean, these have all turned into unbelievable players. So now you're right. What makes you relevant again? We talked about this with Milwaukee a few years ago when trying to get Giannis to sign back the first time, let alone this time, is if they lost Giannis, you're back to irrelevant, right? You've lost everything. You've lost all relevancy. You would drop. You wouldn't have any shot at the title if you lost him. And they hung on to him, and look what has happened. And now he teetered around it again, and they bring in Dame, and he's as happy, as anything right now. So
his quote is, "I'll be very honest, I've never been this open."
Yeah.
It's a terrifying thing for the rest of the NBA to hear from Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, he was shocked at how quickly, Dame's been double teamed and he has been open. So, we'll see where that leads, but they are right there amongst the favorites, obviously, with all this. So they held on to their relevancy, and that's not only what teams are looking for, because remember, teams are businesses as well. So there's a business side of it and the trying to win the title side of it. And every owner is different. I've talked chapter and verse about my owner in Philadelphia, Norman Brayman, not caring about, the team and the winning part of it, just the bottom line part of it more. And every owner is different. So now this team in Oklahoma City has all these assets. What do you do to try and become relevant again? Because the players know and the fans know we're not. So am I spending my money to go to these games? Am I investing myself in this team that right now is doing nothing but acquiring assets? So when are you going to do something? Well, you have a 7-year plan, I guess, with all those draft picks. But now you need to see, there's one thing to collecting them, and there's another thing to see, what am I doing with all of these that will put us back on the NBA map, of which they're not on.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I've seen, the NBA pulled GMs and ask them questions about the upcoming season. I don't think assets are going to be the most exciting player that we're looking for this upcoming season. I don't think assets are going to be playing the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals this year. So it's a difficult road to go on that. But you're right in terms of what that next move affords you, because in a market like that, you've got to find that one star, whether it's through the draft, whether it's making a trade or an acquisition, because free agency is going to be a difficult road to toe on that, to ultimately get you the one that can become more. And that's what we've seen in a number of these places right now, whether it's, the Denver Nuggets and now what they've got, surefire star, homegrown star, and Nikola Jokic that they've turned into that team, Giannis and that side. It's going to be a very interesting NBA season, Dad. I looked up and realized it starts next Tuesday, the regular season. And while the joke among the football community is always the NBA season actually starts on Christmas Day when you get that triple header in the midst of a slower time in the football calendar, I do wonder if someone like Victor Wembanyama is enough to change that and at least create a little bit of early season fascination. We've already seen some of the highlights pouring out of the preseason with Big Vic, that dunk from outside the restricted area that had even the player that got dunked on stunned at the angle that it happened from, stunned at what it took to get to that point athletically. If maybe because we've got a prospect that, Dad, even by the NBA standards, feels like something so far outside the norm that it might get people to pay attention to the NBA sooner than they might have otherwise.
Oh, I agree with that, especially from a highlight standpoint. We know football's still going to win. And when I say football, I mean both the NFL and college. Sure. So I'm with you. So a lot of it depends on when the game is. Is the game not on the night a game of football is? Because that's where people are going to tune. But if you do have a spectacle, like in all honesty, like we thought Zion Williamson was, right? Until that kind of faded away when he came in. I mean, we have had a fascination with the summer league the last couple of years because a couple of stars that have come into the league, and we have not had that. So that was a major thing for the NBA to say, all right, man, we're grabbing people in the summertime for our summer league because of the potential of some of the guys that are now in our league. So yeah, I think it could lead to some of that. How does Dame and Giannis play together early on? See how that plays out. People want to watch that. Certainly Wembanyama and what he's going to do. So there are some things that will make you maybe turn to the NBA a little sooner than you would. And obviously that's good for the sport. We know what's king all the way till then, that everything takes a back seat. But you do have some stars. I think I'm more interested because I don't think, let's see where San Antonio goes this year, but all eyes are on Milwaukee because of Giannis starting to chirp about, hey, you guys going to do something, and they did, to where their power level is going to be in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think overall the most interesting situation with championship aspirations is the Milwaukee Bucks again because of that move, because we finally are getting the answer. It's almost like in its own world or in its own way, Tom Brady leaving the fold in New England. We were never sure we were going to get that. We were never sure we were going to get to see what he was like outside of the fold in New England. Much the same way with Dame Lillard. I always said he occupied the most perfect place in sports. He had become a respected enough player, someone who was loved and adored, the center of this conversation about loyalty to team, while being recused from all the championship slandering we usually do to stars of his caliber who haven't won an MVP, right, who haven't gone out there and won in the NBA Finals. He had found the sweet spot in between that, and now all of a sudden this offseason, I know he wanted it to be in Miami, but he decided enough was enough, and so we get the answer to that. What does Dame Lillard look like in an environment where he actually has a real shot of getting to the title?
And you know what Giannis is not going to be? He's not going to be that open. Okay, I mean, he might as well get over that. I don't think he's going to be that open all the time.
I mean, but it does present that interesting conundrum for teams because, Dad, you hear, we'll take our sport of football. Defensive coordinators talk all the time. What's the thing that scares you the most? The fast guy, the guy who can get you with speed. That's what you're worrying about the most. In the NBA, Dame's the guy that's going to have the ball in his hand first in a lot of instances now. We know that green light for Dame time is open as soon as he nears half court, and so it's going to be that interesting challenge for teams. Who do you try and stop first? Maybe a lot of people asking that about the Steelers' offense as they get healthier coming down the second half of the season. We'll talk to one member of that team next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The AFC North is the creme de la creme this year. No team with a losing record. Take a look at that. We got Pittsburgh coming off a bye this week, taking on the Rams, and the Steelers could be getting a boost with the possible return of Deontay Johnson. He's been on IR with a hamstring injury sustained in week 1. So he said, hell yeah, he's going to play against the Rams in week 7. So we got a hell yeah. I mean, it's not official confirmation, but, hell yeah, brother. Like I said, would be a boost to the Steelers offense here, guys.
That'd be huge. And listen, I feel like a hell yeah on the scale of assertions, Dad, for a player is probable. Like that would be on the injury report designation scale. I would put that as probable. A hell yeah. A yes might be a questionable.
Right.
Looking down, avoiding eye contact would give doubtful to me. So I feel like body language and language reading here, all signs should have Steelers fans feeling pretty good.
Yeah, the line "we'll see" I think would equate to a doubtful as well. I'm with you.
Yeah, there we go.
And here's someone who got hurt right in the beginning of the season. I mean, when you're chomping at the bit to start, and many players do, the injuries happen every single week. So now you're finally getting back and getting ready to get on the field. I mean, the fresh, the old fresh legs, even though you're dealing with a hammy injury, still you haven't been playing football and wear and tearing on your body. So I'm sure he can't wait to get out there and catch a few balls.
And he was the guy last year that was the number one in that receiver room. We spent so much time focused, Allen Robinson coming over after his time in Chicago and his other stops in his NFL journey. We're hopefully going to talk to Allen Robinson from the Steelers wide receiver room here in just a couple of minutes about them getting ready for this Rams week, about Deontay potentially coming back into this offense, because Dad, Deontay was the number one. You've got guys that fill such a variety of roles in this offense right now that I think we're all continuing to wait. There's such a hyper fixation on Matt Canada, his role as the offensive coordinator, Kenny Pickett trying to make that next step in year 2. And you look around this offense and it feels like it should work. Jalen Warren's been sensational for them in the backfield as well. So there's a lot of pieces that you like, and we're just waiting for it to all come together to be a complement to what is a Super Bowl caliber defense.
I agree. I mean, you look at the offense now, Johnson coming back, you have Pickens, Johnson, Robinson as the 3 wide receivers. You have Warren, Najee Harris is the guy that really runs the ball a lot, but Warren is second on the team in receptions right now. So he's the guy catching out of the backfield. So you're right. The weapons are there for Pickett. We've talked earlier in the season about the Pickett-Matt Canada OC relationship and kind of getting that squared away, but it does seem like they have the talent there on the offensive side to complement the defensive side. But as we've talked about with a lot of the AFC North, that's the defenses are carrying these teams right now, but that doesn't mean these offenses can't start to start turning over a little bit. And I'm really interested in talking to Allen Robinson. I mean, this is 9th year. I think we're in his 9th year already. I mean, I'd imagine for him, it's got to be just like I've said it too, playing 9 years. It goes by fast. But man, this one really seemed like it's gone by fast.
It has. He's been a guy that seems like he's been around. Yeah, it seems like he's been around for that long, too. We've been constantly talking about him for a while. It was the free Allen Robinson tour when he was with the Chicago Bears. It seemed like that offense was never going to get fully off the ground. And so we'll see what it's been like on the other side. And for him, playing for one of the coaches in Mike Tomlin, that's also been a fixture and a figure in the NFL for so long. And Dad, kind of at the beginning of this season, I think as of late, it's become a more singular conversation. But we were having weeks ago that conversation about Bill Belichick and Mike Tomlin, both of these coaches that had been defensive-minded head coaches that had been winners for so long. You've been associated with this picture of excellence. In Pittsburgh, it was Mike Tomlin never finishing below 500, always knowing where the floor of your team was going to be. But since then, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots side has really given way a lot more, to where every week I feel like we're doing, would the Patriots fire Bill Belichick now as the question? And the answer is going to keep remaining no, at least on my side. I can't even think of, Dad, what it would take and how bad it would have to go for all of a sudden me to believe that the Patriots would actually consider canning Bill Belichick before he's ready to go. So that conversation's kind of gone down its own path, separate from the Steelers and Tomlin, at least for now.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we've talked about this, and it's going to be talked about every week as they still don't perform the way we think a Bill Belichick team will perform. And I still think it's going to be him stepping away. And there's the pride of, after another bad season, do you want to step away? Or you try and prove that you can build a winning team again. So though I think certainly nothing's going to happen during the season, and then there may be that conversation with Robert Kraft. And I don't think Kraft would fire him. I think it would have to be, hey, do you think it's time to step away and see what Bill has to say? But there is the other caveat of Bill kind of running the team as a GM as well. Do you mute that a little bit? So there are other things that you possibly could do going forward, but I still say he will be the decider of his fate in New England.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've talked about that, but I thought it was very interesting hearing a couple of former Patriots speak on this. Teddy Bruschi, who obviously is as associated with and respected by that Patriots organization as any player that's come through there, talked about what he looked for in this season and said he wanted Bill Belichick to come to this decision on his own after this season, to not see it go on too long here. He said he wants them to have them playing respectable football by the end of the season and then walk away. That's what I want my former coach to do. John Shula doesn't matter. You've got multiple Super Bowls over Super Bowl. You're a better coach, meaning trying to catch that all-time mark here.
Right.
He wants him to do that. And Ty Law, another former Patriot, went on WEEI's The Greg Hill Show Tuesday and talked about how he views those comments and Bill Belichick's future with this team.
When I'm looking at him on the sideline, he doesn't look like he's having a lot of fun. I know it's no fun losing, so don't get me wrong, but you just see everything about the body language and stuff, man. You know what I mean? Because those guys, he's a defensive guy. Those guys can't stop a nosebleed if you gave them a whole year's supply of Kleenex and cotton balls. You know what I mean? They can't stop. You know what I mean? So he's not having fun no more.
So, Dad, these are all points that we've made that Bill Belichick, it should be his decision. And you wonder if with this cocktail of events and everything that's gone on in the season, would this guy just be sick and damn tired of this, not want to look out there and see a team that does nothing in resembling the teams that he has built in the past and the overwhelming standard that he's got there? But for Ty, when has Bill Belichick ever looked like he's been having fun on a New England Patriots sideline?
Right?
Like, can you remember a single time where that man looked full of joy and life on a Patriots sideline, even on the best days?
I was stunned in hearing that. I guess you have to be a former player to know his body language and how he's having fun, because I can't tell a thing. It never looks like he's having a fun day in his life, but the guy, obviously, he loves football. He loves being around it. This is his fun. He's enjoying it. He just doesn't exude it to where you go, wow, look at Bill, man. It looks like he's having a ball out there, until there's all zeros on the clock at the end of one of his, many Super Bowl victories. So the one thing left, right, is the Don Shula, chasing Don Shula, in victories. I was actually on the Dolphins, and we actually played in Philly when we won that game in Philly, and Don Shula broke the record of George Halas. It was a pretty wild thing, even though I was only there for a year, so it's not like I was a huge part of this thing. But Bill Belichick, it seems right that he's the next guy, and to step in line to break that record. So let's see if he's around long enough to do that.
Yeah, and that's something you do wonder, and because we don't know so much about Bill Belichick's motivation for so many things. It's always cryptic answers. If he's going to go off, it's going to be about the history of long snapping, like we got that dissertation during a press conference in a prior season. But we don't really know how much something like that motivates a man like Bill Belichick, who, to Teddy Bruschi's point, Bill Belichick's resume is unassailable at this point, right? Like, I don't feel like there's a lot of conversations left to be had. Even if people want to do in retrospect this whole song and dance with the him and Brady thing, I just don't think it's a useful exercise, because in a world where we constantly struggle to figure out where we see coaching have effects from the outside looking in, right? Like coaching is like an iceberg, where so much of it happens below the surface and behind closed doors. And Dad, having experienced it, for the time I did, for as long as you did, understand as well as anybody, there's going to be so many things that go into coaching, the interpersonal side of things, how you manage the locker room, the standard around the building, that people don't see. That with Bill Belichick, because we had 2 decades of exposure to it and a million think pieces about it and a million iterations of that team that were still successful, we feel like this is the one guy we can point to and say, oh no, we actually see all the areas where coaching seeped into this equation, understanding that I'm always going to ascribe more of the credit to players, because that's how this sport works, and any coach worth his salt would tell you that. But with Bill in particular, that kind of career longevity, even with the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, the greatest winner we've ever seen, still boils down to, places that we can see coaching come out to the public that very rarely pop up for the majority of the coaching public in football.
Yeah. I mean, so do we think he hangs around enough? So you look at the numbers. Don Shula, 347 wins. Bill Belichick, 330 wins. So you're 17 wins away.
Yeah.
You've got 11 more games this year and say 17 next year. So do you think in the next year, this year and next year, it's 28 games that he could win 17 of those? I mean, the way it's going right now, I don't think people think it would go into a year after that. But I wonder, because Bill doesn't seem to be driven by that as much as driven by a Super Bowl. And I understand it's not like you have, when you're in the backyard playing catch, you don't think about, I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. It's like, I want to make a game-winning catch in the Super Bowl. It's all about the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. So I wonder how much that number is important to him. That 347 to be the all-time winningest coach. I don't know. And it's hard pressed with the team that they have right now to think that he could win. Well, he would need 18 wins to actually break that record out of the next 28 games that have to be played through this year and all of next year. So the plot thickens on that. And then that's the part you have to continue to enjoy, because I've said it about players as well, Mike, is when you retire, you don't want to do the February to August thing anymore. Everybody loves game day. Everybody loves to go out. I'd still throw pads and go out on the field on game day and be carted off on my shield after 2 plays. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. But the want is there. It's when February hits, when your season ends, and then it's February, it's March, and you have to start the process over again after your body's healed up and do all the things that you need to do to be ready for the season. Well, for the coaches, that's their world of all the things that they need to do. What's Bill famously known for saying after winning a Super Bowl and taking 10 seconds to enjoy it is how far we're behind everybody else, because they've already had some weeks of off season and we haven't, and we have to play catch up now. But he loves that stuff, and he lives for that. So that's outside of being ousted, which we don't think he will be if it's going to be his decision. Then your decision, again, it's not going to be for Bill based on game day. It's that preparation. It's that February to August to the start of training camp. Do you want to go through all that muck and mire to get to another season, which in all honesty is like icing on the cake after all the offseason work you do?
It's pretty crappy icing right now, too.
Yeah,
So that doesn't really help when all of a sudden you get to the icing and it tastes the way it does in New England right now. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting question. And at their current rate, would the Patriots then let him stick around? Because it's one thing, they're not going to fire him in the midst of this season.
No.
Let him stick around for 2-3 more seasons if it's going to look like this to get to that record just because you love a guy. We've seen plenty of places in the world of sports where athletes, coaches have outstayed their welcome in terms of on-court production. I do think of the late Kobe Bryant at the end of his Lakers tenure. That was a team that was not as good because they wanted to make sure that a guy that meant that much to their franchise was taken care of and felt loved at the end of a tenure that had brought them all the championships and all the accolades that he had brought. It's a difficult bit of calculus we'll have every week the rest of the season to continue to talk about this. Dad, while we're talking about coaching, I wanted to bring this up because I think we're at a fascinating point with the Deion Sanders Colorado experiment that's going on in the world of college football right now. We didn't get a chance to talk Monday or Tuesday much about Colorado blowing a 29-point lead against Stanford in the wee hours of the night going into this last college, or coming out of, I should say, this last college football weekend. 46-43 in double overtime. They lose to a Stanford team coached by Troy Taylor that most people had written off before the start of the season. And Colorado had been humbled on the big stage against Oregon, had bounced back against Arizona State. Most people looked at it and said, all right, this Stanford game and a couple others on their schedule look like the winnable games that could get them into bowl contention. This was Deion Sanders after this loss, talking about his team and their preparation and being ready for the moment or not.
Right now, we're not built for the moment. We're not built for the moment. Some of our players aren't built for the moment where they have to make a play or they have to keep contained or they have to make a block or they have to get another yard. We're not built for the moment right now. What I just said in the locker room to the team is they got to make up in their mind, are they in love with this game or are they in like with it? Because when you love something, you give to it unconditionally. You give everything you got to it, but when you like it, that's just the button you push. And it lights up in a like. That's what they do on social media. So we got to figure out Do they love it or do they like it?
The great line. And Dad, we've heard a lot more lines coming out of Colorado this last week. This program is very giving of the content around their facility and in their meetings. And I've seen a lot of their coaches talking to players about their preparation and their practice habits and about how those things have not been good enough to get to the point that they want to get to. And Dad, you do wonder if this is some of the effects of the way they've gone about building the team this year, where Deion Sanders in the preseason made comments, and he's not the only coach to do this. Lane Kiffin's mentioned it as well, but that in this era, culture is a lot less important to your team, and that culture word didn't mean anything to him. That's usually what sustains you in moments like this, when you have things to point back to of how you go about your business, the things that matter to you, because it seems like this Colorado team is teetering on the edge of blow up with all of that not really as a foundation for them.
Well, I think we are in that period of, classes all stuck together, right? Even when you were, forget when I was playing, even when you were playing, it's not like you had a lot of guys transfer, right? The portal wasn't what it was, and this is from 08 to 12.
Yeah, we didn't have a portal.
No, it wasn't going on. So you built that together. He talks about Deion, and I'll continue to say, I love what he's doing there as far as culture, and he's talking about players maybe not being into it, but he brought in all these players, right? These are his guys that he brought from his previous stop, that he brought in from the portal, that he had to know something about to bring them in from the portal. So these are handpicked by him that are now he's questioning their work ethic. So, the work ethic that also is partly his job to instill, right? Exactly. Yes, that's exactly where I was going. That's on a coach. We talk about getting to the NFL. I don't need an NFL coach to motivate me. This is my job now. If I have to say, well, that coach has got to motivate them, man, give me a break. If you can't motivate yourself as a pro athlete, you got your own issues. But, as an 18 to 22-year-old coming to college, that is part of a coach's job, is to motivate, is to get everybody, to use a PJ Fleck, get everybody, rowing in the same direction, or I think that's his line or something with his
row
oars.
The boat. Yeah,
row the boat. So, that's on a coach to get the especially the top players to buy in and have it filter down. So, you got to kind of look at Deion in this one and say, you brought him in, Deion. These are your guys. Now he'll have recruiting classes to bring in and kind of create that culture with them. But that's one of the things that is missing. And in their situation, a huge thing, because 86 new players, and that's not going to happen every year. But just like I said, with your class, you guys all got to play together for 3, 4, sometimes 5 years, where you can build that if you had the same coach. And if we expect Deion to be there, that's what we're assuming right now, that's what you can build over time.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm empathetic towards the guys on this team is they're getting higher order problems way earlier in that life cycle that you're talking about there. Because to lay the foundation for, hey, these are the things that matter to us as far as our practice habits. This is how we conduct ourselves around the facility. I went through a coaching change at Notre Dame, and when Brian Kelly came in, all new signs up about, hey, this is how we do little things like organize our lockers. This is when we're going to go do things. This is how we structure our off-season program. This is how we're going to structure practice, and this is what's expected when you get there. And we were still a team that struggled on the field while you're getting used to those things. Right. Fast forward to 2012, when all of a sudden we're going undefeated, and now you're learning how to deal with the media attention. College game day is coming into town. Every reporter wants to talk to you. There's people outside your facility looking for autographs, and that was Notre Dame, a place that's a little more used to that. You've got 86 new guys that showed up, and a place that was 1-11 last year that hasn't been good in a long time, that are now getting coverage like the 04 and early 2000s USC teams, where you're not just a football team people care about, you're an idea people care about, and you're a brand people want to be associated with. And so I am empathetic that these players are trying to navigate problems that at this point in their football development, they're not yet at a point where you've got the reps to be able to handle that in a way that I think people just expect is really easy right now. So combine that with some struggles on the field, and I don't think what we get now is all that surprising.
Yeah, listen, and I'll say this as well. When you're talking about somebody not loving the game, it's tough to get them to love the game. That's for sure.
Especially in the midst of that kind of loss on that kind of stage with all of this kind of attention. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We are hopefully going to talk to Allen Robinson from the Steelers. We also got former Michigan tight end Jake Butt coming up, who's doing a great job over the Big Ten Network now. Got a big one in that conference, Dad. We've talked a lot about the different conferences that are going to start to sort out the equation themselves, and Ohio State, Penn State this weekend going to be the beginning of that in that conference.
So let me ask you a question, just to pull the curtain back. We're waiting for Allen Robinson, and he's with the Steelers now, receiver with the Steelers, and they're in their meeting with Mike Tomlin. We're waiting for that to get out. When you were with the Steelers and you had your Mike Tomlin meetings, did they run late? Or you're always waiting for words of wisdom from Mike Tomlin? What could so I'm not sure we're going to get Allen. It all depends on the meetings and how they run.
But this is the middle of game week. This
that's exactly
a big
right.
day in the NFL. We were stunned that he was even doing this.
Absolutely stunned. And then we hear he's in a meeting with Tomlin. I revert to you because you've been in meetings with Tomlin as on the team. And so, I mean, is the expectation, do we think he's going to get out in time to be able to do this?
I would think so. The beauty of a Mike Tomlin meeting is I think they follow a pretty specific cadence because you hear all the sayings all the time from Mike Tomlin. And so what I noticed, and again, it was one off season, it was one training camp, so I had limited exposure to this, but that man is the marker of consistency where you come into the meeting and it's going to start the same. There's going to be a lot of the same points in the middle of that in terms of what he wants to get to. Maybe the content of that will change week to week. But no, I think that's one that you can more set your clock to than one where you have to worry about him going off on a tangent, him finding his way into a subject that you weren't prepared for.
Right.
And then, because that was, I mean, famously, you used to hear the stories, God rest his soul, Mike Leach, when he was still with us in coaching, his meetings were famous for if all of a sudden something got brought up, these tangents that he would go on that would take you 45 minutes in the other direction.
Yes.
And this wasn't talking to the media. Like, he was famous for this too. I called Mississippi State games when he was coaching there, and he would get going on one thing like we'd see in press conferences, ghosts or pirates or anything. And it would take one question from a reporter and ruin anyone's chances of getting a question in. With him, even in team meetings, you heard players saying, oh, no, we could give 45 minutes away to that same stuff inside our team meetings. So not a lot of that from Mike Tomlin, much more of that from Mike Leach.
Yeah, so just know that if Allen Robinson isn't joining us, it's not that Allen Robinson is blowing us off. He's got responsibilities in that locker room. Again, this is Wednesday of a game week, so I'm stunned it was happening anyway. So let's consider ourselves lucky if we're able to get him for a few minutes.
The standard is the standard, so
yes.
saith the sign in that, which don't think too hard about what that means, because it's one of those things that sounds really good to stay, and then the more you think about it, you're like, what does that even actually mean? But it's the basis of everything that goes on in that building.
Yeah.
Dad, one thing I don't think you're going to see a lot of with Mike Tomlin is what we saw from Shane Beamer at South Carolina this past weekend. Shane Beamer, in a fit of rage, a frustrated Shane Beamer after their outing against the Florida Gators, where they lost 41-39 at home, limped into his weekly news press conference on Tuesday and said he was emotional after the loss and made a little bit of a mistake. Here was Shane Beamer from that press conference explaining the source of his new injury.
Certainly that was a gut-wrenching emotional loss, and I was frustrated and kicked something that I shouldn't have kicked, and thought I was okay, but journaling of the game wore off, and before anybody starts the narrative like the head football coach is frustrated and lost his poise and all that, no, I care. And I care about these kids, and I was really upset on Saturday night because I didn't do enough to help them get over the hump and win the football game. So don't think I have to have surgery, but there is a broken bone in my foot. It hurts like you know what.
Well, football guy right there putting off surgery, Jesse, at least.
Yeah, he was like, he said it hurts like you know what, but I've just got to like gut through it. I was like, maybe you shouldn't.
You got doctors right there on campus. Like, I was just lamenting with someone the other day. One of the things, we saw Robert Griffin III before Monday Night Football. He was like, man, you miss having doctors just right around you all the time. You got them there, Shane. Pull it up.
Let me tell you what, they know how to take pain away. Let me tell you that. They know how to take pain away. Again, it's a team that blew a 10-point fourth quarter lead. You know he had to be frustrated. They're 2-4. I think there was a little more expectation out of them maybe this year as a program, hopefully going in the right direction. 1-3 in the SEC, and busted his foot, out of frustration. Have you ever had a coach, Mike? I can only think of one that not hurt themselves, but just lost it. For me, the worst one was Buddy Ryan. We were playing Minnesota, and the offense was on the field, and Ron Heller, our O tackle, got poked in the eye, and I'm trying to remember the player's name, and I don't want to say a wrong name, so I won't even say a name to put it on someone. But literally, I mean, it was right there. I mean, you could see it on tape, just literally poked him in the eye. I mean, and Heller grabbed his eye. I mean, it was a really cheap thing to do. I mean, Buddy Ryan lost his mind at halftime. I think he threw a chair into a whiteboard and destroyed the whiteboard after saying he wanted the guy's knee blown out who had done it. And
oh my God.
Listen, this was in a fit of rage. Cooler heads, prevailed, and that didn't happen.
Not totally out of character for a Buddy Ryan coach team, by the way, though.
Anybody who knows Buddy would know that he would say something like that in the heat of it was, how you go in at halftime, Mike, and everybody kind of goes to the bathroom first, and then you kind of have your time for a few minutes, and then you sit down. I mean, immediately we walked in, and Buddy was losing his mind, drawing up how he wanted this guy's knee blown out, then breaking the whiteboard. And luckily we had, some minutes left because it was the beginning of halftime to everybody like, okay, we're not going to do that. That's not going to happen.
Walk me through your guys' thoughts there. Are you at all fired up hearing him going to bat for your teammates?
Oh, yeah.
Are you sitting there like, all right, just let him get this out of his system and then we'll take care of it? Like, how did you feel about that?
Well, here's the thing. It didn't shock any of us.
Yeah.
Because it was Buddy Ryan. This is a guy who, literally wanted you to fight in training camp, and if he didn't think you fought enough, was going to put you in a drill where you were going to have to fight. I mean, this is one where he told assistant coaches, if you are going to jaw at the players and they start to fight with you, then that's the way it goes. I mean, this is what it was. I mean, when you think about it, it was a little bit ridiculous, but that's the way it was. Yeah. But for me, who was a line stepper anyway, I wasn't one of the best athletes. I got by on watching a lot of tape and just trying to be gutsy and occasionally stepping over the line, and certainly got my share of fights. I was like, hell yeah, brother, this is good for me. You want me to go in there and punch somebody in the face? Hell, I'll do it. Just keep me on the team, keep those game checks coming,
That's a fair point.
The wild thing about that, though, is that player ended up on the Browns the next year. And why I bring this up is as I said, we went to London twice to playing preseason games. And remember, it was just preseason then, but you went for the week and you practiced for the week and then played the preseason game. We went that next year against the Browns, and that player now was on the Browns. Mike, the amount of fights that happened, they had to take him off the field and not bring him out on the practice field anymore. Because he was on defense, so it was when our offense was going on, there would be a fight. Our defense, we were on another field. At least 5 to 8 times we would be sprinting over to that field to get in on the fight that was going on until they literally told this player, you're done. And they came up later and said, he's got a hamstring. But he was done practicing for the week because we couldn't get anything done.
Nobody forgets an eye poker.
My God. Everybody was trying to kill him. Mm-hmm. And our team back then, Mike, you were like, kill that guy? Okay, no problem. Let's go. It was mayhem out there. It was incredible. And the only thing I was bummed about is when we sprinted over there, I wasn't as fast as the other guys, and I was getting there late as I was trying to dive in on the pile and find someone to punch.
I got to say, hearing all of this in totality, from Shane Beamer going out here and apparently breaking a bone in his foot in frustration after a loss, in hearing that a year after an eye-poking incident on an NFL football field, a group of Philadelphia Eagles were so weaponized that they could not function in practice in the lead up to a game for an entire week. It all points back to one incontrovertible fact. Men are too emotional for sports. Men are too emotional to go and play and coach sports. It's unbelievable trying to watch our peanut brains navigate these conflicts here. Unbelievable. We'll navigate some conflict on the field heading into Buckeye Nation this weekend with Jake Butt, former Michigan tight end, next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and very excited to welcome into the show Jake Butt, former Michigan tight end, current analyst over the Big Ten Network. You can also check out his new show on Stadium, Red Corner, Blue Corner, college football show. Making great use of that old Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. Jake Butt going to be joined by former Ohio State linebacker Joshua Perry as they take a look at the world of college football there. And that's always got to be interesting, getting those two sides together, because we talk about the great rivalries in the sport, Jake. We know that was one you lived personally for such a long time. Even now, a bit removed from it as a college football analyst who's seen rivalries in other areas of the country, who's seen rivalries across the sport, that one's still probably at the top of your list and most everyone's list, right?
Oh, yeah. First off, I was excited to join you guys today. Thanks for having me on. But it's kind of a perfect segue because it's Michigan State this week. And everyone asked me, hey, what's the difference between those two rivalries? And the fact that I'm working with Joshua Perry, a former Ohio State Buckeye, on Red Corner, Blue Corner, there's an overlying theme of respect between those two teams. A lot of the hatred comes from outside of the teams. Like I respect a bunch. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I know a lot of those guys. There's a lot of respect. Now, for Michigan State, hatred is the word that comes to mind. So even though the teams are kind of mismatched this week, I think that hatred can make things interesting. But in terms of rivalries, where I'd rank them, Ohio State, Michigan, late November, there's really nothing like it.
And you being, I got to ask, you being from Ohio, now I'm from Cleveland, and when recruits don't go to Ohio State who live in Ohio, man, they really get turned on. How did you, and I ended up going to Notre Dame, and you not only didn't go to Ohio State, you went to Michigan. How did that work?
So, Mike, I actually grew up a Buckeye fan. I grew up a Notre Dame fan as well. So, like, the two teams I grew up loving were kind of the opposite. They were the anti-Michigan. And neither of them offered me a scholarship. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was getting offers from everybody. So I went to Michigan, and a funny story about that. So my freshman year of high school was Jim Tressel. Then sophomore year was Fickle, and then junior year was Urban. So, like, right in that transition period, the more important part of recruiting is when Urban came in. And he didn't want me. So I won the John Mackey Award my senior year. I go down to the College Football Award show, do that on Thursday night. Our SID says, hey, be in the lobby at 7 a.m. We're catching a shuttle to the airport. And I got there at like 6:40. I got there early. So early that there was only two other people in the lobby. The clerk behind the desk and Urban Meyer. Mind you, I've never talked to him in person, and we were just coming off the JT was short game. I never beat him in my career, super frustrated. So I say, hey, coach, how's it going? And, just go over to the wall, start sweating, get beat red, like smoke's coming out of my ears. And he walks up right in my face, and he goes, why didn't you come to Ohio State? I'm like, man, you didn't offer me. He's like, what was it? Were you a bad kid? Were you a bad student? I'm like, I went to Michigan, man, so he wound it up. He said, man, you're a hell of a player. Yeah. You gave me nightmares. I wish you the best. And I'm like, dang, man, like, I really don't want to like you, but I respect you as a football coach. So it came full circle.
Man, he tried to flip it around and put it on you in that spot.
Wow.
It's like, coach, maybe you missed on the eval here, all right, brother? Maybe this is a you problem.
He's an intense dude, too, man. I'll tell you what, it was intense.
I can imagine. We've definitely all seen that at various stops throughout his career. I want to get to Penn State, Ohio State. That's obviously going to be the big game of the weekend. But you mentioned that Michigan State game. We were just talking in the last segment about how feelings can hold over in environments where you've got high stakes, you've got that kind of passion on both sidelines. We saw for the Michigan State game last year, that spilled over into the tunnel. There was that ugly incident between both teams, the fight that went on there. From year to year, Jake, in this kind of rivalry, how much is that stuff going to be on the mind of the guys that take the field this coming Saturday?
It really is always on your mind in this rivalry. I mean, I say this not in a bad way, but like, hey, the conversation is, hey, if your running back gets tackled, like O-line, tight ends, go follow and like make sure you pick your guy up off the ground, because you never know what happens, at the bottom of the pile. It's just one of those weeks. It's a physical week, and that's this week. So you're aware of that. You're aware of what happened last year. Certainly doesn't feel like there's going to be any extracurriculars this year, though. It's pretty quiet on social media. There's not much going on. But here's the thing I know about Michigan State. Their season is made. Like all the stuff they've dealt with, their season is made if they can find a way to beat Michigan. And I know when you go to Michigan State, your big rivalry is Michigan, and you almost feel disrespected that you're Michigan's secondary rivalry, right? Like they know that Michigan's big rival is Ohio State. Their season is made if they can beat Michigan. Now, The reason I wouldn't be concerned if I was a Michigan, I would be concerned if there was a lack of maturity and leadership on Michigan's team. We've seen the exact opposite, man. The way this team is a veteran team full of leadership and they're rolling. I don't expect them to bat an eye. I expect them to handle business this weekend.
Oh, I don't think this is going to be an issue at all. For Michigan, it's going to be when you guys get to Penn State, Maryland, and finish up with Ohio State. And I'm interested in your thought, because there was a thought about Harbaugh when he couldn't get to the Big Ten title game, kept losing to Ohio State, certainly couldn't get to the Final Four. Is his time there ending? And I would always be like, well, okay, who the hell you getting? Are we now thinking of the same thing of Ryan Day at Ohio State, since he's had a couple of years where he can't beat Michigan, can't get to the Big Ten championship game or back to the Final Four? Has the script flipped, and could he be playing for his job?
Some people will tell you that. Yeah, some people will tell you that, right? But like, I completely agree. There's a lot of room to go down than there is to go up. And there's not a lot of good ball coaches out there just walking down the street. You kind of got to get lucky with it. And Coach Franklin's done a great job recruiting. He's had you there every year. I mean, I was talking to him last year. He's like, man, we have a chance to win 10 games, go to a New Year's Six Bowl. And that's a special season almost any time in football history outside of the college football playoff time. So like, we can say what we want about the rivals, Ohio State, Michigan, and the lack of success there. He still has had a lot of success by a lot of standards. But I do think it's fair to say, like, hey, he needs this win. Like, this is a big game. You got your quarterback. You brought in a 5-star Drew Aller. This is why you brought him there to do it. This defense is rolling. I've called Penn State games. The last 2 games I called have been Penn State. This roster is built to win. So I do think this is important, man. This looks like a good year for them to do something special. But hey, man, you got to go on the road and do it. And I think Drew Aller, it's not a must-win game. You know, he'll have a lot of football left to be played. But man, if he can win this one, that's you're starting a legacy there for Penn State fans.
You mentioned Drew Aller and the talent on that sideline. What have you made of Kyle McCord and what we've seen of him now through the first half of the college football season, that long lineage of great Ohio State quarterbacks having to go and live up to that standard on an offense with some great pieces around him?
It's funny. I think we're deceived a little bit because I think C.J. Stroud threw one of the prettiest footballs I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. And that ball it was a magnet to where it needed to be. And McCord's not like that, right? Like, it's not, I wouldn't say he throws the prettiest ball or has the prettiest throwing motion or is extremely, dead on accurate. And yet the numbers still say this is an explosive offense, and he's still putting up big time numbers and great touchdown to interception ratio. But the one thing that stands out as it applies to this week, there's 2 different Kyle McCords. There's a Kyle McCord with the clean pocket, and that's a guy that's about 70% completion rating, about 11.5 yards per completion. Then there's a Kyle McCord under pressure, drops to about 37% completion rating and less than 2 yards per completion. Why does that matter? Because Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator for Penn State, is going to bring pressure. They average about 4.5 sacks per game. So no one gets home and no one brings pressure like Manny Diaz defense. So Kyle McCord, when he is pressured, he's going to have to make good decisions. And the O-line, the running backs, the tight ends, they have to step up to give him a clean pocket.
It's going to be an exciting matchup. You mentioned it feels like we've been building towards this moment in the Big Ten where we're finally getting all these blue bloods, all these big-time teams, especially in the East, getting ready to start playing each other. You guys can hear more about that on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Great show. Jake Butt, former Ohio State linebacker Joshua Perry, and catch him calling games, doing great work over at the Big Ten Network. Jake, we appreciate the time and the admission that you grew up a Notre Dame fan. That makes me feel a lot better about letting a Michigan guy into the house over here.
Hey, my grandfather played for Bob Lally, or Frank Leahy. He was one of Leahy's lads. Yeah, Bob Lally, undefeated from 7th grade all the way through college. He's in Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh, my gosh.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
What a walk-off fact from Jake Butt right here.
Nice
Jake,
mic drop. Well done.
We appreciate the time, brother. We'll have to talk to you again soon here, all right, man?
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Holy smokes.
Man, that's the polar opposite of my career growing up, Dad, where I won 1 Pop Warner game in like 3 years of playing and then was too fat to play my 8th grade year.
Yeah, I coached you in Little League, and let me just say it wasn't the coach's fault. I had bad players.
Yeah, no, that was a Jimmy's and Joe's moment on our squad right there. Not the case for Jake Butt and company. We'll finish up with this, that, and the third next here on GoJo and Golic on the DraftKings Network.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, it is time for this, that, and the third. 3 stories to send you out into the world to close our show. So, fellas, let's start with this. The Phillies cannot stop mashing dingers. It was an offensive barrage for Philadelphia last night. 10-0 over the Diamondbacks. They hit 3 more home runs to increase their tally to 15 in their last 4 games. That is a postseason record. Absolutely. I mean, something's in the water. What's going on?
We said the other day the Phillies were going to continue to rewrite the postseason record books when it comes to home run. And, Dad, you invoked the name of Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, yesterday, and it came back up again. Kyle Schwarber, with 2 home runs last night, now has 18 career homers in the postseason, tying Reggie Jackson for the most by a left-handed hitter in MLB postseason history. They cannot stop tugging at the cape of historical supermen at every which way. This has been an incredible run, and I feel like people kind of all love this Phillies team, Dad.
They're a lovable team. And the other one that I said from the other day was Nick Castellanos hit 5 home runs in a 3-game postseason span. That tied Reggie Jackson. So Reggie, Mr. October, getting tied in a couple of things now. Pretty impressive. But Mike, I've always said, like, again, most of my career in Philadelphia, the fans there love, like, the blue-collar kind of tough guy approach. And that's what these guys are, right? You look at a Bryce Harper, even though he's a superstar, you kind of look at him, you look at Schwarber, you look at Trey Turner, you look at Castellanos, and you just think of kind of lunch pail guys, even though they're paid like superstars, which is what they should be. I know.
They're just hairy. They're just very hairy, and that's what makes them look blue-collar here. And the attitude, I guess. But you're right. They are not paid like blue-collar workers.
They seem like guys that if they're, a group of people are having a beer, they'll stop by and have a beer with you. And I mean, and fans love that kind of stuff. Whether it's true or not, that's the perception of them, and they're just lovable kind of characters who just, as Jesse said, mash dingers. I mean, the 10-0 win. I mean, they're up 2-0 on Arizona. They're gonna win that series, and you have Texas up 2-0 on Houston. I mean, that looks like the possible clash there for the World Series. But Phillies are fun to watch because the ball's leaving the yard.
Oh, and we also know that the ball's leaving the yard fueled by the haters and the doubters for them. I saw this yesterday. DK Sportsbook actually posted this from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Merrill Kelly talked about Citizens Bank Park and said he doubted it would be louder than the Venezuela game during the World Baseball Classic. Trey Turner not only responded before the game, but also had a solo home run. He said, we'll see what he says after tonight's game, where they went out here and beat him up pretty good. So if you said anything within the vicinity of this Philadelphia Phillies team, you are now going to be weaponized and have that used against you by maybe the most vindictive squad of baseball players we've seen in quite a while. Some sports and athletes say that they don't hear the outside noise. Philly's like, no, we hear everything. We see everything, and we're going to destroy you with baseball bats.
We hear it, and we're going to make shirts about it.
Yes, you're going to be a shirt. You're going to be the thing that fuels their champagne shower. And this continued run, it seems like we're setting up for the Rangers, who refuse to lose games, on the other side in the postseason so far, and the Phillies on one side. And it's all good vibes. I said, I like being a dumb fan walking into postseason baseball, and the Phillies are the perfect dumb fan team. They hit home runs. They appear badass while doing it. Yep. They weaponize a bunch of other teams' comments against them. They are a movie baseball team, and this has been a movie run so far. Speaking of movies, let's get to a guy watching things on his phone at training camp. Nikola Jokic.
This is amazing.
And the Denver Nuggets were hanging out at training camp, and there was a video that surfaced of Jokic on the sideline of practice watching intently on his cell phone when one of his teammates comes over to him, Jamal Murray, looking over his shoulder, asking what he's doing, to which Nikola Jokic replied, "I'm scouting horses." Dad, we talked about this man's offseason grind and about his approach to basketball, a guy who seems to be an unbothered king. The one thing he appears very content to grind on is making sure those horses are ready and raring to go once he hits the offseason.
Is there a guy who seems more disinterested at being one of the best in the world to do it than him in basketball? It blows my mind. It's like the secondary thing in his life. It truly, I think, is family, horses, basketball for him. And basketball may even be lower for all I know. But he's like, you know what? He's like, I've got this talent. I guess I'll use it to make myself, 40, 50 mil a year, so I can go ahead and scout horses and get the good horses and do the right things I need to do for my horse future.
Guys, I saw an Onion headline that was like, Jokic looking forward to the end of the season. I was like, yeah. Sounds about right.
I saw that same Onion headline and thought it was very, very real for a second, as they often can blur the line there.
You wonder, and listen, this is probably bad to say, you wonder if he's happy if they don't make the playoffs.
Oh, he definitely is.
Yeah. He's like, I'm bummed we didn't make the playoffs for like a minute, and then, okay, I get to go do my thing now.
He said it was the worst offseason he ever had because it was so short.
It's amazing.
Nikola Jokic has done a few things that most people would deem impossible. One, he's an adult man who's found hobbies outside of his job that he really enjoys, but also seems to have found work-life balance in his approach. Yes, I understand and I hear the chorus of people. I feel like we've gone out of their way the other way to be like, no, this is actually the work that Nikola Jokic puts in the offseason. This is how much he cares about. Of course he cares about it enough to go out.
He does.
The best player in the world right now. His team just won a championship. Obviously, we're having a little bit of fun with us. Don't ruin the joke right now, nerds. But also, it's this idea that, it matters a lot to him, but it doesn't matter too much. And man, what a healthy perspective in this grind set time that we live in, where we've talked about it. Every athlete's got to feel like they got to put their workout video up on Instagram and have all this stuff put out there. Jokic is like, no, you're going to watch me get drunk and hang out and bet on these horses, what you're going to do, and you're going to like it. It is a refreshing entry into the sports world that I am happy to embrace and celebrate.
Hey, it's a role model for the far more mass than the few, right? Of thinking you have to go 24/7 on your sport. And listen, I agree with you. The dude puts in the time. Let's not act like he doesn't. We are having some fun here. But he's not one of those 24/7. My entire life is my job and my sport. And to the end of it all, you are correct. This is what a great work balance life that is. Work-life balance, I should say, that is. I mean, what great perspective. And it always helps that you're able to do it when you're big like that and have the kind of talent you do.
It is amazing how much more people are willing to tolerate your interests outside of sports when you are very good at the thing that you do.
Exactly.
As someone who was formerly not always very good at the thing he did and had interests outside of the sport, people don't like that nearly as much as when you are good and also have those outside interests. When they need you, they're a lot more willing to tolerate your hobbies. But that's a story for another day. Jesse, let's get to the third on this. The theme of our day, it felt like on this show, was beef. And C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Deebo Samuel had that beef spill over to the timeline, mercifully for the rest of us.
Yeah, so this started on Monday, when Gardner-Johnson trolled Samuel for his role in that pregame fight between the 49ers and Browns before San Fran's loss in Cleveland. So he was trolling him. So then it's Gardner-Johnson goes on Instagram and says, "Don't be friendly when you see me." He kind of goes off. Take a look at the video here.
Bro, listen, don't be friendly when you see me. Because you be so flashy. You better hope, bro. You better hope all that talking you be doing when we see y'all, whatever round it may be, because I can guard you. You can't run routes. You're a running back. You're a running back. I ain't gonna sit here and play with you, little boy. Just because you got a little bag, people gave you a little clout, man, you ain't nothing, bro. Stop playing.
So call them a running back.
Wow, he called him a
Call
running
them a running back. Yep.
I hate that for our running back friends out there, that the term and the position have now, Dad, become a slight used in a beef between two skill players.
I'll tell you what is impressive, though, just the ease of which he comes up with stuff, because I was a horrible trash talker. My trash talk consisted of 2 words. The first word, the letter began with an F, and the last word was you. That was pretty much it. I would actually ask my brother Greg, who was pretty good at using words, give me some lines, give me some stuff I could say when I'm on the field.
So the same way that you came to me before calling a Sunday night football game in Taylor Swift's NFL asking for me to write you lines, you were asking my Uncle Greg to ghostwrite your trash talk.
Yes, that's exactly right. Listen, you know what you got to do, Mike. Understand your weaknesses, make them your strengths. And I made them my strengths by asking other people to do the work for me. Who's the winner here?
You know what? We would like all of you to do the work for us by downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing this show, leaving us that 5-star review, and checking us out on YouTube. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.